Government has given the go-ahead for plans by Karpowerships to use 3 ports to supply electricity to the country. Officials say the use of power ships is the quickest way to resolve the country's energy crisis. Karpowerships are floating power plants that use gas as fuel to generate electricity. This is then fed into the country's electricity grid. Let's talk about more about the decision now. We're joined in studio by Transport Department spokesperson Collen Msibi. His department granting the licenses for the power ships to dock at the ports. The biggest news in this ongoing crisis, Collen, as we continue the struggle to keep the lights on. Thank you so much for coming in this evening. So it must have been a busy few days for you and your department. Now, explain to us how the signing off of this worked, because we do believe it felt within the ambit of your minister, but the minister gave the Transnet National Ports Authority the leeway to make the necessary decision to implement this directive. Just talk us through the paperwork, as it were.
Well, of course, we have the responsibility to look at these applications as the Minister of Transport. This is exactly what happened. When we get the application, we've had to look at it. It came about 2020, 2021. So we've had to look at it, and the approval came in February 2023. So the process, we are obviously required to consult with the TnPA, Ports Authority, and that's exactly what we did, to say, here is this application, is it something that you can look at? And they said, definitely we can. And that is why we've had to then grant this approval. So that's not the end of it. They still need to go back to the NPA and say, TnPA, to say, this is what we then want to undertake in these ports. Do you agree with us? What are the operational issues that they're going to undertake there? So that then the authority can then give the stamp of approval. So at this point, it's not like as if tomorrow they're going to wake up and start operating. So they still need to get that approval from the TnPA.
Does it also involve consultations with other departments? Because we do believe that Environmental Affairs Minister Barbara Creecy says her department is considering environmental assessment as well. Is there still space for consultation between departments?
Well, look, we've granted the approval, but there's conditions. Part of those conditions is that when it comes to issues of environmental assessment, the other government departments that are involved in that space, because it's not our competence, they would need to look at those applications and see if they grant approval. So it is not, is it outside our space? We've done our part, but if their environmental assessments, they get disapproved by other departments, it's definitely not our business.
Talk to us then about the ports that have been mentioned here, Richards Bay and Sultana Bay. What went into the process of deciding on those specific locations?
Well, look, when the application comes and say these are the ports that we want to look at, we're not going to say, no, why don't you look at Durban or Cape Town? So we consider what's before us, which was in the application. Even the 20 years, we've been asked, why 20 years?
That was going to be my next question, so you've jumped the gun. 20 years seems like a very long time, Scott, for anything, a relationship even.
Yeah, look, it is the application. It's not us to say, why don't you consider 20 years?
But what is the thinking behind that long period of time? Does it benefit us, or does it benefit the owners of these Karpowerships?
Well, as far as I know, there's been discussions in terms of build, operate, and transfer. So it's part in principle that has been agreed, as far as I know. So it is something that obviously will benefit the country, will take over that infrastructure at some point. So those are the things that went in, but it is not our space to then decide on those things. That is why then the TnPA must come into play. So the decision for us was based on the consultation, and if the landlord, which is TnPA, agrees with it, who are we to say no to that kind of an application? Now, but we're just stunned as to why there's such an interest in this Karpowership, because as we speak, there is total umlilo, which has applied for the very same thing. But nobody is raising an issue about it.
Well, I suppose we live in an era where anything that's signed off, especially for such a long period of time and involves millions of rands, you know, people are allowed to ask questions specifically about the processes involved in signing off on it. And that's why you're here to answer some of those questions. I mean, for instance, the Democratic, all of these things are politicized. So the Democratic Alliance has asked for a record of the decision. Are you looking at those kinds of requests at this point, or is that further down on the line?
Well, I'm not aware of those requests, but These hands are clean. If there's any issue that they want to raise, we are ready to answer those questions.
All of this important paperwork and deals being concluded, taking place within a rather urgent atmosphere. Some would say almost a panicked atmosphere. Is there then pressure to push this through faster than a process like this would normally take place?
Not at all. I mean, this is not a quick fix. I mean, the application has been there for 2 years.
It has, and it's been highly
So
politicized.
you can't therefore say, look, this is being pushed. I mean, there was a question earlier in another station where they were saying, is there undue pressure which has been put into the department? There isn't any pressure. I mean, we are doing this outside of any intergovernmental structure. So we are just doing it as a department on our own. So you can't therefore say there's been a pressure on the department to approve this.
So this is not an emergency thing, that because we keep hearing from the president and from the stand-in CEO of Eskom that we're heading into dark times because winter is coming and this will probably be with us for the next 2 years. None of that urgency has forced your hand to get this process rolling at this point. Well, because like you said, the application was there for 2 years, but it has been dormant because so many questions were being asked about who was involved with the deal and how it was going to be processed.
No, I mean, the issue of the application being there, we've had to also do our own internal work on it. So you can't therefore say, look, the reason why it's been 2 years, it is because there's been some deals being done and all sorts of things. No. I mean, we've just gone on with our work. We've done that. We've consulted people that were to go. I mean, the TnPA could come back and say, no, it's something that we wouldn't look at. And then we would have to disapprove this kind of an application. So there hasn't been any pressure. While I think the issues that we are raising are quite important. There's issues of national security, issues of, I mean, the load shedding is basically taxing the country in terms of the economy. So it's something that we've had to look at. But to say that there's been pressure for us to push this through, why don't they say there's been pressure for us to push through the total umlilo application as well?
Well, there also is a question on what the return on investment would be. Is there a belief in the work that you've done and the research that you've done in this deal that the return on investment will make it worth our while? Because from what I understand, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we're only looking at it providing or putting about 1,000 megawatts into the system once it is up and running. Is it worth it?
Look, it's something that I wouldn't know the technicalities in as far as the megawatts and all that. But we've had to look at what kind of role is going to play in the economy. I mean, everybody agrees we need all the power we can get to light the country. I mean, if somebody then comes, the application of this nature, I mean, it is important. I mean, the Minerals and Energy, they've granted these guys the rights to generate power. So who are we to then say we can't give you access to the port? So we've had to look at all those things. Hence, I'm saying the issue of the national security is very, very important. Can you imagine somebody is powering, generating power into the grid, and then we come as transport and say we can't have access to, by the way, you cannot get into those ports. Sorry, we're not going to grant you that. Can you imagine what that would do to us?
Okay, well, we're going to leave it there. Good for you to update us on the fact that this is still an ongoing process. So I'm sure it's not the last time we'll be speaking to you about that as well. Collen Msibi is the spokesperson for the Transport Department, joining us live here in the studio. We thank you for your time this evening.